I'm going to begin with just a little bit of background about Padre Pio before going into my own experience, because I think the context is very helpful. Padre Pio was and continues to be one of the most accessible of saints and one of the most charismatic. He was born in 1887 and he died on this date in 1968. So he's the Rolling Stones were playing when he was around. He's a modern saint. Even as a young man, Padre Pio felt like he could do more from heaven than he could on earth. And from the time he was in his late 20s, he was actually praying to move that along. He lived to 81. And for millions of devotees around the world who are getting together tonight, it's like his spirit never left. He still has a very, very strong footprint in this world. Padre Pio was the first priest to have the stigmata. Others had the stigmata before him, but he was the first priest. The first person ever to have the stigmata was St. Francis. And just last week was the 800th anniversary of when he received that. Padre Pio received the wounds in both hands and both feet on September 20th, 1918. And that was about a month after he was hearing the confession of a young man in a booth, and he saw this angelic figure come with a lance. And the angelic figure threw the lance and it hit him in the side and caused a physical wound. And he had to leave. He had to crawl back to his cell, leaving a trail of blood. And he had the stigmata, and that's what's known as the transverberation, the wound in the side. He had them for 50 years, and they were painful. He lived with open wounds for 50 years. Padre Pio had a dizzying array of spiritual gifts. From the time he was 5 or 6 years old, he would see Jesus and Mary and St. Francis most every day, and he would talk with them. And it wasn't until he was like 27 or 28 years old, he was talking with one of his spiritual directors, and he was acting like the director was being modest. And that's when he found out that this doesn't happen for everybody. He had the gift of healing. He had the gift of reading hearts. He had the gift of prophecy and of bilocation, so that he could be in more than one place at the same time. And he also visited people with his supernatural aroma, and he often visited people in dreams. And when he would see the people after he had appeared in there, he would tell them about it before they said anything. So it wasn't just like they dreamt him. For all of his extraordinary gifts, the primary tools that Padre Pio used to carry out his mission were the same tools that Father Woodhouse and any other priest uses: confession, mass, and distributing communion. At the peak of his ministry, people would travel from all over the world to the village of San Giovanni Rotondo in Italy, which was a tiny village. The last 45 minutes were by mule track when he started there. This did not slow down when he died in 1968. Over 8 million people a year go to his crypt. My son Will and I were there 5 years ago. So that's more people go to his crypt than go to Lourdes, and 2 to 3 times more than people who go to Mecca. Padre Pio did most of his work from the confessional booth, where he'd spend up to 14 hours a day. And at the peak of his ministry, they needed to set up, it was like a ticketing system. And people would often wait 2 to 3 weeks to hear him and could hear confession. Confession was transformative for him. It wasn't by rote. He had the gift of reading hearts, so that if someone came and wasn't telling him what was really going on, he would let them know. And in one case, he asked a man, he said, "Is there anything else?" And the man said no. And all of a sudden, something like a movie started playing in the confessional booth, which showed this man committing murder. Padre Pio was known to speak harshly and to withhold absolution if he didn't feel like people were authentic in their confessions and wanted to, and truly wanted to amend their lives. And people would be shocked. They'd wait weeks to see him, but he would be loving to them when they came back, when they realized that they needed to be more serious about it. Padre Pio was what is known as a victim soul. So he would take on the sins and sufferings of other people. And he suffered the passion intently at every Mass. There was a particularly sensitive man who had gone to one of Padre Pio's masses, and he had had a vision there. And this man had a friend who was a priest at San Giovanni, and he wrote him a letter to see, like, is what I saw real, or did I imagine this? And this is what he wrote. While I was waiting for Padre Pio to come to the church to celebrate Mass, I saw 2 rows of angels coming out of the sacristy ahead of him. Mary was next to Padre Pio, and she stood by him when he reached the altar. At the elevation of the host, Jesus appeared, and it was difficult for me to distinguish between the two, between Jesus and Padre Pio. And at the consecration, that fusion became complete. The 2 people were one. So the priest showed the letter to Padre Pio, who reluctantly affirmed that what the man had seen was true. But the man hadn't seen everything. There was a Franciscan who asked Padre Pio once, he said, "Father, I understand that at communion, the victim soul dies. And do you lie in Our Lady's arms?" And Padre Pio said, "No, I lie in the arms of St. Francis." St. Francis, Padre Pio was a Capuchin, which is a Reformed Franciscan order. So people would travel from every corner of the world to attend Padre Pio's masses, which were at 5 a.m. They'd start lining up at 2 in the morning to get a good seat. And even people who weren't visionaries, they could see Padre Pio was being transformed during Mass. And when Padre Pio was embarrassed by the stigmata, not because of the pain of it, but just because it attracted a lot of attention to him. But the only time he didn't wear gloves over it was at Mass. And when he'd raise his hand, people could see the stigmata bleeding. And there's a lot of discussion among Catholics now about the real presence in the Eucharist. And people did not doubt when they saw Padre Pio, they didn't doubt that God was in his hands. And many pilgrims who had gone to a single Padre Pio Mass would talk about how their life was changed forever after that.